Hi, and welcome to What Developers Say About IntelliJ IDEA. I'm your host, Mala Gupta, and today I'm very excited to interview my super amazing colleague, Trisha Gee. Hi, Trisha. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you in the series.
Hello, I was wondering when you're going to ask me to interview me. I felt left out. Thank you for having me.
If you are a Java developer and an IntelliJ IDEA user, I'm sure you would have already seen Trisha speaking at one of the conferences or watched a screencast by her. And Trisha wears many hats. A Java champion, she has over 2 decades of experience. She's an author and international speaker, and she's passionate about sharing things that help developers level up in Java, IntelliJ IDEA, and career in general. I think I should stop now because I can go on and on and on. So, Trisha, let me get started by asking you when did you start using IntelliJ IDEA?
I think it was 2006. I was working for one of the investment banks in London, and one of the people on the team, actually the team lead, he suggested that because we were all using the other Java IDE, and he was suggesting that we use IntelliJ IDEA, and so I was like, okay, I don't really mind. Like whatever, if you think it's better, then I'll use it. So I was using it in 2006. I then, because I was doing consultancy and I moved from project to project, I didn't always have control over which IDE I was using. I came back to using IntelliJ IDEA in 2009 when I started working for a financial exchange in London.
Does it relate to working as an advocate with JetBrains?
Right. So yes, so that's a good question. A lot of people assume that I'm really passionate about IntelliJ IDEA because I work for JetBrains, when in actual fact it's the other way around. So when I was working with IntelliJ back in, oh sorry, I should say IntelliJ IDEA, back in 2006, I thought it was a fine IDE. It kind of did what I wanted. When I started pairing with people when I worked in this financial exchange, and I saw people using the IDE the way it's supposed to be used, in 2009, for about 4 years after about 2009. And I really started to learn how to work in a way which is really effective with IntelliJ IDEA. Then I completely changed my mind to being, before I was sort of IDE ambivalent. And then after pairing with people who kind of use it like really effectively, I became really passionate about IntelliJ IDEA. Like, this is the IDE that I'm going to use. This is the IDE which gives me the features which allow me to program in the way that I want to program. So I was doing that for about 4 years for the financial exchange. And then I started doing something which we now call advocacy. I started doing some presentations and stuff. I switched to work for MongoDB as a developer advocate. And one of the things I wanted to do for MongoDB was do some live coding on stage. And I was using IntelliJ IDEA. If you're going to live code something in a 45-minute slot, you need to have a lot of automation and a lot of tricks to be able to do things quickly. And IntelliJ IDEA gave me a lot of that stuff. So I was coding a web-based application in IntelliJ IDEA with the MongoDB backend in Java, because one of the things I found is that a lot of people were giving presentations for MongoDB for sort of very webby types of applications, and not a lot for sort of Java and enterprise types of applications. So I wanted to show how to put together something like that quickly with Java. This is pre-Spring Boot, so pre the days when you could really quickly build a Java application. So I was doing this with IntelliJ IDEA live on stage for about a year or so. And then, and that's on the conference scene, that's where I met Hadi. And Hadi said, "You're really good at this. Maybe you should come and work for JetBrains and do it for JetBrains." And I was like, well, I quite like my job at MongoDB. It's kind of cool. But then I thought, well, if I'm doing it for JetBrains, then I can focus on just the Java and the IntelliJ side of stuff, and I don't have to include the database and other stuff as well. So I decided that this was going to be my perfect job. And what I wanted to do, and I could do it very effectively working for JetBrains, is the experience that I had learning IntelliJ IDEA, pair programming with people who understood it and could use it very effectively. I could give other developers that experience with live coding on stage, with screencasts, with the demos that I do. So I had been using IntelliJ IDEA as a developer for 1 or 2 years without really using it at all, not really understanding its power, until I saw other people using it. So what I really wanted to do working here is to help people see, look, you can do this and you can do this, and there's this and there's this. And so it was a really great career move to be able to sort of blend all my passions and show people how to use the tool properly as a developer advocate.
Thank you on behalf of all the developers who are using Java and IntelliJ IDEA, because I have seen your screencast before I started working with JetBrains, and I really like how you blend in how to work with a Java feature inside IntelliJ IDEA, because as developers, we know that we have to work with an IDE. It could be IntelliJ IDEA or some other. I know a lot of people also work with Vim or other text editors, but not majority of developers work that way.
When I moved to the financial exchange, where I was pairing with people, that's when like I said, that's when it became my go-to IDE. I started using it then. In fact, I paid for it with my own money when we had I think it was the 2012 Doomsday Sale, which a lot of developers started paying for IntelliJ then, because it was on sale, it was half price or something. So I actually paid for it then, because at that point I started using it to it it just helps me to create code. I don't want to say it helps me to create code faster, because it's not about working faster. It's about what I was doing at that time was doing test-driven development. It was about creating the tests. To me, were a really good way of, they really helped plug a hole that I had in the way that I previously had worked. Because when I'm coding stuff, I'm often thinking, but what if this, and what if that, and what if someone does that? And previously I had been writing my code and then maybe writing some tests afterwards. When I worked at LMAX, we were doing test-driven development. So then I would literally write down, what if this, what if that, what if the other, in an automated test or a set of automated tests. And when you do that with IntelliJ IDEA, you can generate the code from your tests, you generate the stubs from your tests. And that really helped unblock me a lot mentally, because I can write down all my thoughts, all my what ifs, and then it kind of generates the shape of the code. And then I can start filling in the holes there. And then I can use the refactoring tools to move stuff around. And that is, for me, it works much better for the way that I like to develop code. I like to be able to think of my questions, create something that works, and then mold it to something which is prettier or better in some way afterwards. So when I started working at LMAX, the reason I started using IntelliJ IDEA and it became my go-to IDE is because it allows me to work in a way which is much more comfortable for me to work as a developer.
We had this conversation a lot of time earlier, because when I started working with JetBrains, I remember having a similar question for you, and you were kind of happy, of course, using IntelliJ IDEA, but you paused for a moment and you said, I don't know what is it that really makes it stand out for developers. I think that's one of the best parts. It doesn't get into the flow, and it's just molds according to the way that you think.
It's really hard to describe that idea of the flow, because it's not one thing that contributes to flow. It's the way it all works together, which kind of helps you get into the flow and stay in the flow. And every time I try and demo it, it's impossible to demo that, because flow is just this kind of like state that it takes you a while to get into, and you can't demo that on stage, and you can't demo it in a 5-minute video.
This is one question which I hate to answer, and I kind of get asked by a lot of developers that what are my favorite features in IntelliJ IDEA, because there are so many of them. And I think the question is overwhelming, because when I answer this question, I think that if I do not tell all the features to the developers, then probably they would miss out on a lot of things. So, let me start with what you just mentioned about the flow and writing test. I know you are very passionate about the flow and writing test and working with a version control system. So, which of these, working with a version control system and writing test, is your favorites?
So I'm going to cheat by going for like more of an umbrella term. So I think that probably the feature that helps me most stay in the flow is code generation, which is like a huge umbrella, right? Because code generation could be, create class file, create method, or I use code generations. So like when you're writing your test and you say something like square.draw, and the draw is in red because you haven't created the draw method yet, you do Alt Enter on draw, and it generates the draw method with the correct signature. So that kind of code generation, I use that all the time. Or if you implement an interface and you say generate methods, generally speaking, the code generation is probably the thing that helps me stay in the flow the most, because I'm like, I'm going over here, and I'm just going to get IntelliJ to kind of like stick the stuff in the way to keep everything compiling and everything going, so I can keep going in the same direction. So, oh, and the other thing which falls under code generation, which is why it's a massive cheat, because like lots of things are code generation, is live templates. So live templates, as someone who demos code live templates are an absolute lifesaver, either using the built-in live templates, or I quite often create my own live templates for when I was doing these live demos for MongoDB, for example, creating a standard like REST endpoint, you can create a live template for that, so you don't have to type all your annotations and all your methods and stuff. So live templates is probably my favorite feature of IntelliJ IDEA, because it just feels like magic. But it's probably not the one I use the most. Code generation generally. And then I'm gonna go to the other nice big broad feature, which is, if you haven't really got the hang of IntelliJ IDEA yet, what is the one thing you should use? Use Alt Enter, like everywhere. And that's another massive cheat, because Alt Enter is it's context sensitive suggestions. So it actually covers a huge range of things. It includes fixing errors. It includes code generation, because you can do code generation from Alt Enter. It includes I think you can do live templates from Alt Enter. It includes inspections and intentions. Of course, you can change the way that your code looks if you Alt Enter on it. Warnings and suggestions. So Alt Enter is just like a massive cheat, but like if there's one keyboard shortcut that you need to know, I think it's Alt Enter, because you can tap into a lot of IntelliJ IDEA's power just using that one keyboard shortcut.
I couldn't agree more, because when I use Alternator in IntelliJ IDEA, it's like a friend I can talk with, and they can really guide me through things which I could not see. I remember when I was trying to get a hang of lambdas in streams, I was writing some code and there was some magic happening. My code would change the background and I would get a suggestion from IntelliJ IDEA. Hey, do you know you can write a lambda here? I said, okay, let me give it a try. And wow, all the boiler code is gone, and I get that sweet one line lambda, which was amazing, because I could get to work in the way that I used to work earlier, still get to learn a lot of new features in Java without putting that extra effort, which was amazing.
That's literally how I learned Java 8. I learned Java 8 by, I didn't really get lambda expressions, so I would type out an anonymous in a class, because I'm like, I get what this is. I'm implementing one of these. I need one of these. And then I'd say to IntelliJ IDEA, like, can you turn that into a lambda for me, please? And it goes, here's a lambda. And then it says to you, you can use a method reference. I'm like, I still don't get method reference. What is that? And it does a method reference. You're like, okay, that is more readable. Or what I like most about it is that you can also reverse that. So if you use a method reference and you're like, I don't really know what that means, you Alt Enter and turn it back to a lambda expression. You're like, okay, fine, that's better. So you can, like you said, it's like having that pair programming with you, saying, should we try one of these or should we try one of these? And you can kind of decide what works best for you.
Other thing that I want to ask you, Trisha, is how many times have you used double shift or search everywhere in applications which is not IntelliJ IDEA?
Oh my God, yes. So what was I? So I'm using a tool. I'm using a different tool at the moment, because I'm doing some. I'm working on 2 books at the moment. One book I'm writing in IntelliJ IDEA with ASCII doc, which is amazing because you use all of your IntelliJ IDEA shortcuts. You can move code around. You can expand selection and all the stuff you're used to doing with code. You can do it when you're writing a book, and it's great because again, it helps you stay in the flow, and you're like not having to rethink stuff. I'm writing another book in a completely different tool because it needs a completely different way. Am I allowed to say this? Probably, yes. So I think people know that I'm working on Headfirst Java at the moment. But Headfirst is a very different style. Headfirst is like graphical and it's all laid out. So I'm using a desktop publishing tool. And I'm doing like, I'm doing Command D to duplicate stuff. Like that doesn't work. It uses completely different shortcuts. And every time that I use a keyboard shortcut that doesn't work, I end up like banging my head against my flow. I'm like, oh, right, what was I trying to do? Where am I going? And then you find the keyboard shortcut, you do a bit of research, you're like, how do I duplicate this page? Okay, how do I get these elements? And you're like, okay, fine. And you come back and you're like, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Yeah, it's really hard.
Absolutely. And trying to kind of fold or unfold your text or code and trying to move them up and down in other tools.
Yes. Yeah, the up and
So,
down thing when you're doing text, it's really helpful in IntelliJ IDEA that you can be like, oh, this paragraph
mhm.
belongs here or this code belongs
Yes.
here. And you're
Yes.
doing what I was using Google Docs the other day, this morning actually, and I tried to put a
Mhm.
link in somewhere and it was like, yeah, no, it's not going to work here. Rubbish. Oh yeah, that's one of the things I like about IntelliJ actually. So when you've got a word selected, and you can press brackets, and it will surround it with brackets or quotes. It won't overwrite it. But then I do this all the time in Google Docs or something. You've got a word selected, and you go, right, I'm just going to press the bracket to put it in brackets, and it overwrites that word with a bracket. You're like, no.
So when you start working with IntelliJ IDEA, what are the features that you use in the first 10 seconds of working with IntelliJ?
um, Open the project window, Command 1 to see where I am. Open the VCS window, like you were saying about version control, Command N. It depends a little bit on what I'm trying to do. So if it's a brand new project, I'll have a different set of things. But usually if I'm opening a project, I'm going back to this project and I want to pick up what I was doing, Command 1 to have a look at the project structure, Command 9 to open VCS, and then make sure that I've got the most up-to-date version of the code. So Command T to pull the most recent version of code from version control. So those would probably be the first things that I would do, just to sort of see. That allows me to see where I am, to make sure I'm up to date, and sort of get my head in the right space. If it's a new version of IntelliJ IDEA as well, like if it's not my custom installation, I also hide tabs, hide navigation bar, hide breadcrumbs. What's the other thing? Hide the tool window buttons if they're visible as well.
You have to pick, let's say, top three features which are your favorite when you are working with a Spring application.
Oh, a Spring application. All right, good. I'd like the gutter icons for Spring to allow you to navigate around your Spring your Spring entities and things. So, for example, I used to code with Spring like ages ago when I was a developer. I used to write Spring applications with the various IDEs, including IntelliJ IDEA Community, which doesn't have the full Spring support, and this would be with XML configuration, but it's the same if you're doing annotation configuration. And if Spring is not configured properly and you're not using a Spring flavored IDE, you can't see that. You don't get a compilation error. You just start the application and it goes, I can't find this bean, or I don't have one of these, or whatever. If you're using IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, firstly, it will show you if something's missing, if it can't find something. And secondly, the problem with things like inversion of control and dependency injection is you don't always know where those dependencies come from. So if you've got the Spring navigation, especially through the gutter icons, you can look at a field and you can be like, okay, where does this come from? What injects this? What creates this object? So you use the gutter to navigate to the declaration of that object. So that's my number one thing for Spring, because that's something that's difficult to get without the IDE support. What are the other things? So you said top three for Spring. For Spring, what we found with the Spring Boot, what was the Spring Boot RESTful application that we wrote in April, is it's really, because it doesn't have a UI. It didn't have a UI. It's just got REST endpoints. I was using, again, this is IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate. I was using I can't remember what the official name is, like the HTTP client or the in-editor HTTP client in IntelliJ IDEA. So there's a little button that you can click on near the REST endpoint method, and you can open that up in the HTTP client editor thing, which I'm supposed to do a video of, but still haven't done. And then you can kind of you can create your GET request or your POST request with all the stuff that you need. In fact, me and Dahlia showed it in the recent Docker MongoDB video. And so then you can just create your GET request, create your POST request. So you don't have to just test it in the browser, or you don't have to use an external tool. You can kind of just do this inside IntelliJ IDEA. And you can also save those settings so that you can save it inside your IDE and share those sort of test endpoints with other members of the team. So I'm a big fan of that, of the HTTP client thing, actually, because sometimes I've struggled in the past. If you've got an API and you're trying to work with that API, then you have to use a different set of tools to try and work with it. And obviously I want to do everything in IntelliJ IDEA. So that's two. You said three. Oh, I've got a good one. It's not specific to Spring, but it is something I've used a lot with Spring Data applications, which is that, again, this is ultimate, the database integration. So that you can create a connection to your database, and inside IntelliJ IDEA, you can see your MySQL database or your, in my case, usually a MongoDB database, and have that all inside IntelliJ IDEA. So you can be having a look at the data inside your database, inside IntelliJ IDEA, so that you can see, for example, if your tests aren't matching your expectations, you can kind of like poke around inside the database, inside the IDE. And that's the thing I like about IntelliJ IDEA, is like, it's an integrated development environment and literally integrates everything that you want. In the past, I had to use external tools to talk to my database. I had to use an external tool to see. I'm not really a command line person, so for my version control, I wanted to see the little dot icons of like, what branches do I have? Where am I? Where do the merges happen? And so I was using an external tool for all of that sort of thing, an external terminal, like all of that now I do inside IntelliJ IDEA. There's no need for a separate tool, and that, again, that helps keep you in the flow, because you're not going, right, I'm going to alt tab out. Okay, what was I alt tabbing out to? Where am I? What am I thinking? You have everything in the context inside your IDE.
I want to ask you about a feature or features that you do not use every day, but you think are really important for developers.
I think two features, and they're kind of related, two features which are really helpful when you need them, but you don't use them every day, are test coverage. So you not only can run your tests, but you get an idea of test coverage. And the other one, which I kind of think is sort of related, is the profiler, which I know
Yes.
that you know intimately, Mela. Um, so
Yes, I get the sarcasm there.
I know you worked really hard on understanding the profiler, and you did a great video on it. But did you do two videos on it?
No, I did one on Profiler, but I did two on the debugger.
Right. So, the debugger. No, but hopefully,
Yes.
I would really hope that developers are using the debugger a lot. I think that, for me, coverage and profiler are the kinds of tools that you don't use all the time. You use them every now and again. For example, I would hope that your continuous integration environment is providing you with some sort of coverage stats anyway. But sometimes when you are, let's say you're working on a new big feature, you might want to do a quick check that you've kind of that you have tests which cover the code paths in this particular module. So I would, every now and again, not very often, but every now and again, I would run the coverage tool just to sort of see, did I miss anything? Are there any code paths that haven't been tested? Sometimes I might use it to find out if something got tested like 4 or 5 times. You might be looking for, there might be some duplication in your tests. But what's most interesting for the code coverage tools is when you've got logic statements, and you can see that the if is covered but the else isn't covered. That to me is really important, because that means, oh, I've really missed a critical test there. Or it might mean you'll never get to that case, in which case it's just dead code and it's just getting in the way. So I like to, every now and again, I like to poke a particular module or a particular area with a coverage tool, just to sort of see, have we got sane coverage here, especially if it's code base that I don't know very well, or if it's legacy code. But also, if you're creating something really new, you want to make sure that you've got the right coverage. And the profiler is a tricky one. So I did work on a high performance system in London. If you're working on a high performance system, you should have automated performance tests in continuous integration. It's really important to have representative data. Profiling and performance testing is a massive topic. However, and generally speaking, I wouldn't want an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA to be running on my system while I'm profiling the system, because it also will interfere with the performance of your system, because IntelliJ IDEA is using memory and CPU and all the rest of it as well. However, in order to get a feel for potential bottlenecks, in order to get a feel for testing maybe a hypothesis of, this method seems to be using a lot of memory or taking a long time, or maybe there's a lot of these types of objects on the heap, you can use IntelliJ IDEA's profiler quite with lower barrier to entry to kind of test some of these hypotheses, and then maybe start creating some more specific performance tests, or some or profiling on a more production-like environment. So I find that the profiler and coverage are both really good tools to use every now and again, just to kind of point you in the right direction to perhaps figure out if your hypotheses are correct, or if there's something that needs to be doing, something extra you need to be doing in another area. One of the other things I like about IntelliJ IDEA's support for the profilers is you don't have to do the profiling inside the IDE. You can load a snapshot or something that's been profiled elsewhere, bring it into the
Yes.
IDE, and then it will point you to, the places in the code it's talking about. You can draw some flame graphs and stuff like that. So I like that. So you don't have to just use the IDE for profiling. You can use it for visualization and navigation and troubleshooting stuff.
The other point that I quickly want to mention is about the debugger. It has amazing features when you talk about even simple things like setting conditions on the breakpoints.
Actually, the debugger remind me of one more thing though. So it's related to the debugger. While you're debugging, you can call up evaluate expression, and that's really really helpful. Again, something that I didn't know about till I was pairing with people. So if you stop on a breakpoint in the middle of your application, bring up evaluate expression, and you can type arbitrary expressions in there, and it will tell you, what the value, either what the value of various bits of data are, which you can kind of get from watch expressions, or more interestingly, if I call this method at this point in time, what will it do? What will it return me? So you can just type arbitrary code into evaluate expression, and that can be a really good way of like diagnosing what state the application is in at that time and what would happen if you do various things at that point in time.
We are running out of time, and for everyone who's listening, it's difficult to cover all the amazing features which IntelliJ IDEA has. And Trisha has already created a lot of screencast on the features that she mentioned, and a lot of features that she could not mention because we had limited time. And if you are interested in finding more about these features, I would highly recommend that you check out all the screencasts. Trisha also has a talk where she talks about why she likes working with IntelliJ IDEA. Trisha, I think that was for in Feb this year, IntelliJ IDEA conference, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. That was for IntelliJ IDEA Conf, because it was like the 20th anniversary. It was like, finally, I want to write a talk where I can basically say why IntelliJ IDEA rocks.
Has IntelliJ IDEA helped you to be a happy developer?
For sure, yes. I mean, there's lots of things that make a happy developer, like having coffee, for example. Got my coffee t-shirt on. No, but it has made me happier. It's made me, do you know what it's really helped me do, especially with the thing we were talking about in terms of doing test-driven development, in terms of enabling me to work in a way which is comfortable for me? It has helped to reduce that confusion and doubt that you always feel as a programmer. So whenever you're writing code, you're always thinking, is there a better way? Could I do it this way? Have I thought about this? What if this? You're always questioning yourself as you write the code. And what I found is that specifically doing test-driven development, because I particularly like that, but combining that with the way that IntelliJ IDEA will help to generate things for me and help flesh out the code for me and make suggestions for me, it helps me to reduce some of that like panic and doubt. So I can write some tests to check my assumptions. I could generate code. I know the code is always working. I can look at the suggestions and warnings to go, okay, there is another way of doing it, but I don't really want to do that. I can confidently refactor things using refactoring tools and then rerun all the tests and make sure everything's working. So it's not just IntelliJ IDEA, the tool. For me, it's a combination of the fact that I like working with test-driven development. I like having continuous integration. I like being able to refactor my code. But IntelliJ IDEA is a really important part of that whole puzzle because it helps me to do all that stuff, and it gives me a lot more confidence that what I've done, it may not be the perfect solution, but it is a working solution, and it answers the questions that I have set for it by writing these tests. This is what I expect the code to do, and then IntelliJ IDEA says, yes, your code does meet those expectations, and so that makes me happy.
Thank you so much, Trisha. It has been a pleasure to talk with you, and we're very grateful that you share all these tips with us today, because it's being a developer and sharing them with others in a way that makes sense to them. They are all different skills, and I'm super happy and super glad that we have an amazing person like you who has been able to do that. Um, I'm using amazing a lot of times, but it's okay.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for talking to me, because I always love to talk about IntelliJ IDEA. Especially with someone as amazing as you. I haven't mentioned that you're amazing. Thank you, Mala. You're amazing.
Thank you so much, Trisha. I think we will form a mutual admiration club now.
For sure.